In this lesson, we'll learn how to use the curves adjustment here inside of Photoshop. All right, great. So I've got our lesson 18 begin file open here. And we've looked at the brightness contrast adjustment, and we've also in the last lesson learned about the levels adjustment. Now, between those two, the levels was giving us a greater degree of control over the light and the dark values in our image, the luminance values. Now, in terms of control, there's one other logical step, and that has to do with the curves adjustment. So just like we had kind of a logical step in complexity within the brightness contrast adjustment to the levels adjustment, there's another step between levels and curves. So let's just go ahead and kind of recap what we already know. When it comes to an RGB image like this one, we know that there are 3 channels of data right over here in our channels panel. We have red data, we have green data, and we have blue data. And what we're looking at in our final image is the composite of all 3 of these channels, combined. Now, we learned in the levels adjustment, let me just pop one of those in here really quickly, that we have a histogram here. And this is important because it represents the pixel data ranging from pure black to pure white in our image. Now, if I come over here and we'll just collapse that, and I'm going to drop in a curves adjustment. And again, we can do this right down here, or we can do it up in our adjustments panel. Just as a side note, we can also access curves up through image and adjustments and curves right here. But again, keep in mind that this is a destructive change when applied through the image menu here. So I always try and apply as an adjustment layer just so we're working non-destructively. So I'm going to drop in a curves adjustment, and you'll see the curves adjustment settings open up in our properties panel again. So now in looking at kind of what's going on here, this looks a little different than levels, but there are some similarities. So let's talk about those first. So just as with levels, we have our histogram right here kind of in the middle of this graph, and we can read this histogram the exact same way. We think about the pixels in our image that are close to pure black, if not pure black. Those pixels are represented on the left-hand side of our histogram. Now, the pixels in our image that are pure white, or close to white, are going to be over on this right-hand side of our histogram. So you can kind of see the distribution of values throughout the image here. You can see most of the pixels are kind of in this area right here and into the midtones, but we do have a few pixels over in this white area, or this bright area, probably the sky and maybe some of these highlights and some of these buildings that have some lighter values in them. So now, if we remember, in the levels adjustment, we had this output levels slider right down here. So this actually becomes important because it's a little bit different when it comes to curves. So this histogram, as we're used to reading it with levels, is going to be considered our input levels, or rather our input values. That is as they currently sit in the image. Now, when we make changes to these values using a curves adjustment, we're outputting new values, and those output values can be read with this diagonal line right here. So now with the adjustment, or rather with the levels adjustment, we could come in here and let's say we wanted to darken up the blacks. We could come in and grab this black arrow and slide that, and it works the exact same way with curves, but you can see here as we get darker, notice what happens to our output levels here, our diagonal line. It changes location. As a matter of fact, there's a little dot right there, a control point on this diagonal line, and it no longer intersects right over here with the corner. It now comes down and intersects right here. Now remember, when we do this, we are clipping all of the pixels that lie between this black arrow all the way to the left. So basically all of those pixels are being assigned to pure black. Now, when it comes to the white pixels, they work exactly the same. We could come over here and grab this white arrow and start to clip those pixels as well. And you can see we're basically increasing the amount of contrast in our image, narrowing the distance between pure black and pure white. Now, the real power in this curves graph, let me just adjust that back just like so, comes when we begin to move and create our own control points on this curve. So, in the last lesson we learned, again, like I said, about this output levels and how we can begin to limit the whites and how bright they can be, and we can limit the blacks and how dark they can be, we can do the exact same thing on our curves graph here. And that would be by taking and sliding this dot right here, this control point, down. So you can see here how we're slowly darkening up the white areas. We're limiting how bright they can be. So the same works with the blacks, only instead of going down, we're going to go up with that here, just like so. Again, you can see the effect of that is it looks like our image is a little bit washed out because our blacks are no longer pure black. So let's go ahead and slide that back down. And like I said before, the real power in this curves adjustment is when we begin to come in and start to click on this diagonal line. And we can come in and start to add our own custom control points. Now, this is where the name curves actually comes in. So you can see by adding this control point here, we've created a curve. This is no longer a straight line. So if we wanted our whites to be a little bit brighter, we could come in and just drag this guy up a little bit. And if we wanted to make sure we maintain some of the depth of our shadows, we could come down here and add another control point to the curve and drag that back down, sort of like so. So you can kind of see what we've done with this curve. Now, based on the image you're working with, you can come in and really start to create kind of a custom curve here that best suits your image and the look that you want to achieve with that image. Now, based on the control points that I've added here, we've still got a fairly decent image. Maybe we just really wanted to blow those highlights out. We wanted to maintain some depth in our shadows. But I think when I watch new Photoshop users use this curves adjustment, they find that it's very, very easy to really kind of quickly break your image and make it look pretty bad. So you can see here, just by adjusting those control points, I've really made this image look pretty bad overall. But fear not, there's actually a little bit easier way to work with this curves adjustment. Now, first let me go ahead and show you how we can actually get rid of these control points. Once we've placed them onto our curve, we can actually just tap on one of them and drag it up and off of the curve. So if we wanted to get rid of one, we just tap, drag, and it's gone. And you can see I've taken all three of them off now, and we're back to the image as we originally started with. So what I wanted to show you here is this little tool right here. Now, this is called the On-Image Adjustment tool, and it's part of this curves adjustment. So what this allows me to do, if I click on that, you'll notice that my cursor changes to this little eyedropper tool. But watch here in my curves graph as I begin to mouse over different areas in the image. What it's doing is it's locating those on the curve. So if I wanted to say come in here and maybe darken up the sky a little bit, I could tap on that and I could drag it down. Now you can see it just so happens that that sky was my white values. So the sky right now is white. If we wanted to come over here and maybe start to darken up the shadow inside this door, we could start to drag that down, just like so. And you can see all of those values are starting to be adjusted by the curve. And Photoshop is actually automatically finding that location on the curve for me. Now if I wanted to come in and say maybe brighten up this building right here, I could come in and tap on it and drag up. And again, Photoshop has located those pixels on my curve, and we're adjusting just those pixels. So this On-Image Adjustment tool is really pretty nice and makes quick work of kind of simplifying working with this curves grid, and allows you to be a little more visual and a little more strategic about how you start to darken up some of these values. Maybe we really wanted to darken up the water. We'll come over and darken this guy up a little bit as well. You can see I've now added 3 control points together here that are all really close. So we can come in and just kind of manually adjust these a little bit. Maybe pull this one off. And let's come in here and maybe darken this up a little bit. So you can see here how we're really starting to make for some really dark values in this image. And obviously, it really depends on what's your vision for what the image looks like as to what you do with the image. Now, when it comes to this curves adjustment, again, we have a number of different presets up here. Again, just like with the levels adjustment, you can experiment with some of these. Oftentimes, they're a good place to start. So below that, again, we have the ability to work with the composite of all three channels, like we've been doing in this lesson. But we can also come over here and start to work with the individual red, green, or blue channels. And you can see here how the histogram actually sort of shifts color to indicate which one of the channels we have selected here. So, and again, just as with before, we have also an automatic button here, and that will allow Photoshop to automatically determine what it thinks are really the best distribution of these luminance values throughout the image. So in this case, if we go ahead and click on auto, you can see here how Photoshop adjusts the curve. And if this isn't really quite satisfactory for you, then maybe you come in and use it as a starting point. And you come in and start to maybe modify the curve based on how you would like to see the image based on Photoshop's automatic adjustment. All right, fantastic. So this is the curves adjustment inside of Photoshop. Very, very powerful tool. And again, this is going to take a little bit of time getting used to, but don't be afraid of this adjustment. It's actually very powerful, and once you get used to using it, you'll really be able to accomplish a lot of really great things inside your images.